Abraham Lincoln was back at City Point when news reached him that Union troops commanded by General Weitzel had now occupied Richmond. "Thank God that I have lived to see this," he remarked to Admiral Porter. "It seems to me that I have been dreaming a horrid dream for 4 years, and now the nightmare is gone." For Jefferson Davis and the Confederate government, the nightmare was just beginning. 24 hours earlier, the Confederate president had received the devastating news of Lee's evacuation plans. Robert E. Lee's evacuation plans. Seated in his customary pew at St. Paul's Church for the Sunday service, Jefferson Davis had received, of course, a God-believing dickhead. The KKK was a bunch of God-believing pieces of shit, too. 9/11, oh God, huh? Yeah, it's all y'all give a shit about, fucking assholes. Seated his customary pew at St. Paul's Church for the Sunday service, Jefferson Davis had received a telegram announcing that General Lee could not hold his position longer than till night, and warning him that we must leave Richmond as the army would commence retreating that evening. Thereupon, an attendant at the service noted, Davis instantly arose and walked hurriedly down the aisle beneath the questionings of all eyes in the house. Summoning his cabinet to an emergency session, he made preparations for a special train to carry the leading officials and important government papers south and west to Danville, where a new capital could be established. As word of the evacuation of the troops spread, the citizenry panicked and a general exodus began. In the tumult, a small fire deliberately set to destroy the tobacco warehouses before the Federals arrived raged out of control, burning nearly everything between Main Street and the river for about 3/4 of a mile. All the public buildings in its path, including the offices of the Richmond Examiner and Inquirer, were destroyed, leaving only the Custom House and the Spotswood Hotel. The news of Richmond's capture, April 3rd, 1865, and down goes Richmond, Virginia. Down goes Richmond, Virginia. Why didn't they pick Mobile, Alabama, or Austin, Texas? Richmond, Virginia's right across the Potomac, right there next to D.C. Sons of bitches. But they were talking about one last bloody battle. We might need one last bloody battle, is what Sherman and Grant had told Lincoln not a day or two ago. The news of Richmond's capture on April 3rd, 1865 reached the War Department in Washington shortly before noon, when over the wire came the words, "Here is the first message for you in 4 years from Richmond." The telegraph operator leaped from his seat and shouted from the window, "Richmond has fallen." The news quickly spread by 1,000 mouths, and almost by magic the streets were crowded with a host of people talking, laughing, hurrahing, and shouting the fullness of their joy. A Herald reporter noted that many wept as children while men embraced and kissed each other upon the streets. Friends who had been estranged for years shook hands and renewed their vows of friendship. Gathering at the War Department, the crowd called for Stanton, who had not left his post for several nights. As he stood upon the steps to speak, recalled his aide A.E. Johnson. He trembled like a leaf, and his voice showed his emotion. He began by expressing gratitude to Almighty God for his deliverance of the nation. Of course, God-believing dickhead. Then called for thanks to the President, to the Army and Navy, to the great commanders by sea and land, to the gallant officers and men who have periled their lives upon the battlefield, drenched the soil with their blood. Stanton was so overcome by emotion that he could not speak continuously, but when he finished, the crowd roared its approval. "All right, you nervous, fat fucking son of a bitch." What's wrong with Stanton? Stanton's like a big, like portly, protruding. He's like a Boris Johnson kind of guy. Seward, who had been at the War Department awaiting news of Richmond's fall, was urged to speak next. Clearly understanding that the moment belonged to Stanton, he kept his remarks short and humorous. He was beginning to think that it was time for a change in the cabinet. He began, "Why, I started to go to the front the other day, and when I got to City Point, they told me it was at Hatcher's Run, and when I got there, I was told it was not there, but somewhere else, and when I got back, I am told by the secretary that it was at Petersburg. But before I can realize that, I am told again that it is at Richmond and west of that. Now I leave you to judge what I ought to think of such a Secretary of War as this. The crowd erupted in loud and lusty cheers, and a beaming Stanton led them in a chorus of the Star-Spangled Banner. Well, it's time for us to sing Star-Spangled Banner then, huh? Well, the Star-Spangled Banner is so pretty. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed from the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous flight on the run and we roll, the gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, and the rocket's red glare, and the bombs bursting in the air gave proof to the night that our flag was still there. Land of the free, the home of the brave. Land of the home of the free, and the land of the brave. Of the brave. There you go. Newspapers raced to issue special editions. The demand seemed inexhaustible, the Star reported, and almost beyond the power of our lightning press to supply 100 herald couriers, as fleet on foot and as breathless with enthusiasm as Malice with his fiery cross raced to distribute papers in every section of the city. Extra glorious fall of Richmond, read the headlines, adding that black troops were among the first to enter the city. For anyone who missed the cries of the newsboys, the sound of 800 guns fired at Stanton's order marked the signal triumph. That night, with bands playing in the streets, candles sparkling in the windows of government buildings, and flags flying from every house top seaward, joined a group of guests for dinner at Stanton's house. The evening's joy was diminished only by the anxiety Stanton and Seward shared for Abraham Lincoln's safety. Earlier that day, Seward had talked with James Speed about his fear that if there were to be assassinations, now was the time. With the fall of Richmond, Seward told Speed the Southern people would feel as though the world had come to an end. At such moments, history suggested desperate men might be prompted to take desperate action, and the president, being the most marked man on the Federal side, was the most liable to attack. Aware that Mary had invited Speed to join her 2 days later on a return trip to City Point, Seward begged him to warn the president of the danger. Stanton, who worried constantly about the president's safety, needed no reminders that the situation was more hazardous than ever. He had tried to keep Lincoln from going to Petersburg, asking him to consider whether you ought to expose the nation to the consequence of any disaster to yourself, and pointing out that while generals must run such risk in the line of their duty, political leaders were not in the same condition. Lincoln was already back from Petersburg when he received Stanton's telegram. He thanked the secretary for his concern and promised to take care of himself while simultaneously announcing his intended departure for Richmond the next day.